I, 25F, have been living with my mom, 48F, and stepdad, 52M, in my stepdad's house for the past 3 years. My stepsister, Ella, 28F, also lives here because her husband works overseas. The thing is, Ella and I have never gotten along, and the tension between us has only gotten worse over time. From the moment our parents started dating, Ella made it clear she didn't approve. She would roll her eyes whenever my mom came up in conversation and made mean comments about how her dad could do better. When our parents got married 5 years ago, Ella refused to attend the wedding, claiming she had a work emergency. But I later found out from a mutual friend that she was actually at a beach party that day, posting selfies and drinking margaritas while our parents exchanged vows. After the wedding, Ella's attitude towards me went from cold to downright harsh. When I first moved in 3 years ago, she welcomed me by leaving a list of house rules on my bed. Rules that only seemed to apply to me, like quiet hours starting at 8 p.m. and no guests allowed without 48 hours notice. Of course, she never followed these rules herself. Since then, Ella has gone out of her way to make me feel unwelcome. She, accidentally, spills drinks on my clothes at least once a month, always claiming it was a mistake but never offering to help clean up or pay for dry cleaning. She eats food I've clearly labeled in the fridge, then gaslights me by insisting I must have eaten it myself and forgotten. She constantly makes nasty comments about my appearance, like asking if I've given up when I wear sweats around the house, or suggesting I should do something about my acne. One incident that really stands out happened about a year ago. I had a box of childhood mementos stored in the garage, old report cards, art projects, photos, that sort of thing. One day I went to get something from the box and found it was gone. When I asked Ella about it, she casually mentioned that she had thrown it out while decluttering the garage. She claimed she thought it was just old junk, and acted like I was overreacting when I got upset. I'm still devastated about losing those irreplaceable memories. To keep the peace, I've tried to limit my interactions with Ella as much as possible. I mostly stay in my room when I'm home, only going out to use the bathroom or grab quick meals from the kitchen. I've started doing my laundry late at night to avoid running into her. I even bought a mini fridge for my room so I could store some basic food items without worrying about Ella eating them. But it's hard to completely avoid someone when you live under the same roof. Family dinners are especially tense. Last Thanksgiving, Ella started a huge argument at the table, accusing me of flirting with her husband before he left for his overseas job. It was completely untrue. I barely even spoke to the guy beyond basic pleasantries. But Ella went on a rant about how I was always throwing myself at him, and how she couldn't trust me around her marriage. The accusation was so out of left field that I was stunned into silence. My mom tried to defuse the situation, but my stepdad just sat there, not defending me at all. The argument ended with Ella storming off and me in tears. It caused a massive family rift that lasted for weeks, with extended family members taking sides and holiday plans getting canceled. Throughout all of this, it's been clear that my stepdad favors Ella. He's always bragging about her accomplishments, no matter how minor. If Ella gets a small promotion at work, he treats it like she's become CEO. Meanwhile, when I finished my degree last year, he barely acknowledged it. My stepdad also constantly brushes off Ella's bad behavior. When I complained about her eating my food, he just shrugged and said, "That's what sisters do." When I tried to talk to him about the mementos she threw away, he said I was living in the past and should be grateful for the decluttering. But if I so much as leave a dirty dish in the sink or forget to take out the trash, he lectures me for hours about respecting his house rules. Things came to a head last week when Ella announced she's pregnant. Her husband had just gone back overseas for work, so she'll be staying here throughout her pregnancy. My stepdad was over the moon about becoming a grandfather. He immediately started talking about converting the guest room into a nursery, going on and on about paint colors and crib designs. The next day, my stepdad pulled me aside for a serious talk. He said that with Ella's pregnancy, the house was getting too crowded and that Ella would need extra space and support during this time. Then he dropped the bomb. He thought it was time for me to start looking for my own place. I was shocked. I've been living here for years and contributing to household expenses, and suddenly I'm being kicked out because Ella is pregnant? Later that evening, I overheard my stepdad talking to my mom in their bedroom. He was pressuring her to convince me to move out, saying things like, "Ella needs a stress-free environment for the baby, and it's time for your daughter to stand on her own 2 feet. He also mentioned that Ella had been complaining about feeling uncomfortable with me in the house. My mom seemed hesitant, making non-committal noises, but she didn't strongly object either. Over the next few days, my stepdad launched a full-scale campaign to get me out of the house. He started leaving apartment listings on my bed, circling rent prices that were way out of my budget. He would talk loudly about the benefits of living independently whenever I was in earshot, telling stories about how he grew as a person when he got his first apartment. He even offered to pay my first month's rent if I found a place quickly, acting like he was doing me a huge favor. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen and started listing all the reasons why I should move out. He said I was holding Ella back from fully settling in, that I was a financial burden on the family, despite the rent I pay, and that it was selfish of me to take up space when Ella needed it more. He even implied that the stress of living with me might be bad for Ella's pregnancy. I was hurt and angry, especially since I've always tried to be a respectful housemate. The final straw came when my stepdad changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to give me the new one. He said I could have it back when I showed him proof that I'd been apartment hunting. It felt like such a petty move, and it made working from home nearly impossible. I had to use up all my mobile data just to attend Zoom meetings for my job. I finally decided to confront my mom about the situation. I asked her directly if she wanted me to move out. She hemmed and hawed, eventually admitting that she and my stepdad had been discussing asking me to leave, but she hadn't agreed to anything yet. She seemed torn between supporting me and keeping the peace with her husband. I told my mom that I wasn't ready to move out yet. I'm still saving up for a down payment on my own place, and the current rental market in our area is insane. Even a small studio apartment would eat up most of my monthly income. Plus, I don't think it's fair that I'm being pushed out just because Ella is pregnant. There's plenty of room in this house for all of us if Ella and I could just learn to coexist. My refusal to leave has caused a huge uproar in the family. Ella is playing the victim, claiming that the stress of living with me might harm her baby. She's been walking around the house with her hand on her stomach, wincing dramatically whenever I enter a room. My stepdad is furious and has started giving me the silent treatment, communicating with me only through passive-aggressive notes left on the fridge. Even some extended family members have gotten involved. My aunt called me to say I was being selfish and that family should come first. My cousin messaged me on Facebook telling me to grow up and stop freeloading off my parents. It feels like everyone is ganging up on me, and no one is considering my side of things. The whole situation has put a huge strain on my relationship with my mom. I feel like she's not standing up for me, choosing her new family over her own daughter. We used to be really close, but now there's this tension between us all the time. I catch her giving me these sad, guilty looks, but she still won't directly stand up to my stepdad. Ella, meanwhile, is milking her pregnancy for all it's worth. She's constantly asking my stepdad to run out for bizarre food cravings, even in the middle of the night. She's taken over the living room with pregnancy books and baby catalogs. She even started playing Mozart through speakers, saying it's for the baby, but I'm pretty sure it's just to annoy me since she knows I'm trying to work from home. I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I really the asshole for not wanting to uproot my entire life just because my stepsister is pregnant? I've lived here for years without major issues, at least on my end, and I don't see why Ella's pregnancy suddenly changes everything. I'm not against the idea of moving out eventually, but I want to do it on my own terms when I'm financially ready. On the other hand, I know this is technically my stepdad's house, and he has the right to decide who lives here. And maybe I am being selfish by not prioritizing Ella's needs during her pregnancy. I know pregnancy can be stressful, and maybe having me around really is causing her anxiety. But the thought of being forced out of my home while Ella gets everything she wants yet again makes my blood boil. I'm also worried about my mom. I don't want to put her in a position where she has to choose between me and her marriage. But at the same time, I feel like if I leave now, I'll be giving up any chance of ever having a real relationship with my stepdad or being seen as part of this family. The whole situation has me stressed out and losing sleep. I've started looking at apartments just to appease my stepdad, but my heart isn't in it. Every listing I see just reminds me of how unaffordable everything is and how unprepared I am to live on my own right now. So, Reddit, Aita for refusing to move out? Should I stand my ground and fight for my place in this family, or should I just accept that I'll never be as important to them as Ella and her baby? I'm at my wit's end, and could really use some outside perspective on this mess. Update: a lot has changed since my last update, and I never expected to be writing this update. After my last post, things at home got even worse. My stepdad intensified his efforts to get me to leave, making comments about my presence being a burden on the family. Ella's pregnancy symptoms seemed to worsen whenever I was around, and she'd dramatically clutch her stomach and complain about stress. The breaking point came during a heated family dinner. My stepdad brought up the topic of me moving out again, and I finally snapped. I told them how unfair and hurtful their behavior had been. I reminded them that I paid rent and contributed to the household, and that I wasn't ready financially to move out. To my shock and disappointment, my mom took my stepdad's side. She said that while she loved me, Ella's pregnancy had to take priority. She suggested I could stay with my aunt temporarily until I found a place of my own. I felt completely betrayed. Realizing I no longer had any allies in the house, I decided it was time to leave. I spent the next few weeks frantically searching for an affordable apartment and eventually found a tiny studio on the other side of town. It wasn't ideal, but it was all I could manage on my entry-level salary. Moving out was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt angry, hurt, and abandoned by my family. The first few months on my own were tough. I had to budget carefully to make ends meet, often skipping meals or picking up extra shifts at work to cover my expenses. Over time, though, things got better. I threw myself into my job and eventually got a promotion. I made new friends in my apartment building and started to enjoy the freedom of living on my own. I even adopted a cat, something I could never have done at my stepdad's house due to Ella's alleged allergies. My relationship with my mom and stepdad became distant. We'd talk occasionally on the phone, but our conversations were always superficial. They never apologized for how they treated me, and I never fully forgave them. I didn't visit the house, not wanting to deal with Ella or be reminded of the painful memories. I heard through some relatives that Ella had given birth to a baby boy. My mom sent me a picture, but I didn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to feel happy about the new addition to a family that had cast me aside. Life went on, and I slowly built a new normal for myself. I dated a bit, made progress in my career, and even started therapy to deal with the lingering pain from my family situation. I was doing okay. Not great, but okay. Then, about a week ago, everything changed again. I received a call from my mom. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, what she told me left me speechless. Apparently, shortly after I moved out, Ella and her husband had started working on my stepdad. They convinced him that since Ella was his only biological child, she should be the one to inherit his assets. They played on his emotions, talking about securing the future for their son, his only grandchild. At first, it was just small things. Ella convinced my stepdad to add her name to his bank accounts, claiming it would be easier for her to help manage his finances. Then she suggested he transfer the title of his car to her name, arguing that it would save on insurance costs. Gradually, they worked up to bigger assets. Ella and her husband talked about estate planning, emphasizing the importance of having everything in order for the baby's future. They brought in a lawyer friend of theirs who drew up new documents. My stepdad, blinded by his love for Ella and his excitement about being a grandfather, signed everything without really understanding the implications. Over the course of several months, Ella and her husband managed to get my stepdad to transfer nearly all his assets into Ella's name. This included the house, his retirement accounts, and even his small business. My mom, who had always been passive in financial matters, went along with whatever my stepdad wanted. The final blow came last week. Ella and her husband sat my mom and stepdad down for a talk. They announced that they wanted to make some changes to the living situation. They said that with the baby, they needed more space and privacy. Then they dropped the bombshell. They wanted my mom and stepdad to move out. My stepdad was confused at first, thinking Ella was joking, but she was dead serious. She explained that since the house was now in her name, she had the right to decide who lived there. She gave them 2 weeks to pack up and leave. When my stepdad protested, Ella's husband pulled out the legal documents my stepdad had signed. Everything was ironclad. My stepdad had unknowingly signed away his rights to everything he owned. He and my mom were left with nothing but their personal belongings and a small checking account. My mom was in shock as she told me all this. She kept saying she couldn't believe Ella would do this to them, that there must be some mistake. But deep down, I think she knew it was real. She ended the call by asking if she and my stepdad could stay with me while they figured things out. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. The people who had kicked me out when I needed them most were now facing homelessness themselves. It felt like karmic justice. But another part of me was furious on their behalf. What Ella and her husband did was cruel and calculated. They had taken advantage of my stepdad's love and trust, manipulating him into giving up everything he had worked for. I told my mom I needed some time to think and that I'd call her back. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a long time, trying to process everything I'd just learned. After much consideration, I made the difficult decision to say no to my mom's request. I explained that my tiny studio apartment barely had enough space for me and my cat. I simply couldn't accommodate 2 additional adults comfortably. I also expressed that I wasn't emotionally ready to live with them again after everything that had happened. I felt guilty saying no, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being. The past year had been about rebuilding my life and gaining independence, and I wasn't willing to jeopardize that progress. Instead, I offered to help them look for other housing options and reach out to extended family members who might be able to take them in. I also suggested they seek legal advice to see if there was any way to contest Ella's actions. The conversation was difficult, and I could hear the disappointment in my mom's voice, but I stood firm in my decision. As much as part of me wanted to help, I knew I couldn't set myself on fire to keep them warm. This situation has brought up a lot of complicated emotions, and I'm still processing everything. I hope that my mom and stepdad can find a solution, but I also know that I need to prioritize my own mental health and stability. It's a tough balance, but I believe I made the right choice for myself.